Why ruin two lives when we can ruin yours? Dad said, my parents told me to admit to a hidden run for my sister. When I said no, they disowned me. Can you imagine your own parents looking you in the eye and asking you to sacrifice your entire life, your freedom, your future, your very identity for your sister's crime? That night, in the cold, sterile air of a police station, I realized that for some families, appearances matter more than honesty, and some lives apparently are just worth less than others. The precinct air was thick, heavy with the stale smell of burned coffee and the crushing weight of despair. My hands trembled in my lap, almost imperceptibly, as I sat across from Detective Daniel Mercer. But I was acutely aware of the quiet, impenetrable wall my parents had built around Scarlett, my younger sister. Her mascara had run, leaving black streaks down her impossibly flawless cheeks, making her look even more beautiful in her feigned grief. My mother's fingers constantly stroked Scarlett's hair, murmuring soothing words, comforts I'd never once heard directed at me. Not once. Someone needs to take responsibility for this. Detective Mercer's voice cut through the tension, his eyes sweeping between us. The evidence suggests one of you was behind the wheel during the hit and run. Mrs. Evelyn Parker is in serious condition. My father stepped forward then, his face a mask I knew all too well. It was the same cold, calculating mask he wore when making ruthless business decisions, assessing costs and benefits with brutal precision. Officer, he began, his voice smooth, my daughters are here to fully cooperate. We just need a moment to discuss this as a family. They led me into a small, antiseptic side room. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a sickening yellow glow on everything. Scarlett collapsed onto a chair, burying her face in her hands. Her sobs, loud and theatrical, echoed against the stark walls. My mother rushed to her, cradling her as if she were still 6 years old, not a 24-year-old woman. Then my father turned to me. His gaze, I swear, is burned into my mind. I still see it when I close my eyes. Claire Bennett, he said, his voice bland, utterly devoid of emotion. We need you to tell them you were driving. The words hit me like a physical blow, stealing the air from my lungs. What? I choked out a frantic whisper. No, Scarlett was driving. I wasn't even in the car. My mother, without even glancing at me, spoke. Your sister has her whole life ahead of her. She just got into graduate school. James wants to marry her. She's going to do something meaningful with her life. The unspoken implication hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Unlike you, I'd heard it 1,000 times in every dismissive gesture, every disdainful look throughout my life. This is ridiculous. I wasn't there. The truth will come out. I pleaded, turning to Scarlett, desperately hoping she'd speak up, tell them how insane this was. She just sobbed harder, her face hidden. My father's voice dropped, taking on that chilling tone he reserved for difficult negotiations where he knew he held all the power. You are 29 years old, Claire Bennett. You work in a supermarket. You live in a studio apartment. You've never done anything noteworthy with your opportunities. Scarlett wouldn't survive jail, Mom said, finally meeting my gaze. Her eyes were cold, assessing. Look at her. She's delicate. She's sensitive. But you're stronger. You've always been the tough one. What are you talking about? The words spilled out before I could stop them, raw and exposing the hidden truth that had defined every family dynamic for as long as I could remember. My mother flushed, but she didn't deny it. You're being theatrical. This is about practicality. Scarlett has opportunities you will never have. Why squander two futures when we can just waste one? Something inside me solidified in that instant. Hard, cold, crystal clear. When I looked at the woman who gave birth to me, I saw a stranger, someone who had calculated my worth and decided I was, worthless. It's your responsibility as the older sister, Dad commanded, his tone condescending. For once in your life, contribute to this family. I walked out of that room without saying another word. My legs felt like lead, but my back was ramrod straight. I gave Detective Daniel Mercer the complete truth. All of it. Scarlett had called me that night, distraught, begging me to come to the station. She'd been driving drunk. She'd hit Mrs. Evelyn Parker in a crosswalk and panicked. Our parents had arrived before me, already cooking up their monstrous plan. The look on my mother's face as I spoke fueled me through everything that followed. My hands shook as I answered the detective's questions, but my voice remained firm. He was patient, methodical, meticulously noting every detail. Through the glass of the interview room, I saw my parents' faces contorted with rage. Dad paced like a caged animal. Mom wrapped her arm around Scarlett, who had slumped again, no longer sobbing, but glaring at me with absolute loathing. "Let me just confirm I understand," Detective Mercer said, reviewing his notes. "Your sister called you around 11:53 p.m. and asked you to meet her at the station. She didn't explain why over the phone." "No," I replied, wrapping my arms around myself, feeling a sudden chill despite the stuffy room. She just kept saying she needed me, that something bad had happened. I thought she'd been attacked or robbed. She sounded so scared. "And when you arrived, your parents were already there, and they took Scarlett to a private room first." "Yes," I affirmed, the memory making my stomach churn. When I walked in, Dad immediately started detailing their strategy. They'd already made all their decisions. They just needed me to agree. Detective Mercer put down his notepad and studied me with a look I couldn't quite decipher. "Miss Claire Bennett, what you're doing takes incredible courage. The hardest cases are always family-related." "They're no longer my family," I heard myself say. The words felt more real, more true than anything I'd ever uttered as they left my lips. The detective excused himself to consult with his colleagues. I sat alone in that room for nearly 50 minutes, watching the clock tick by as my old life, my old self, faded away, second by agonizing second. Through the glass, I saw my parents gesticulating wildly. Dad's face was flushed with fury. A uniformed officer stepped between them and the interview room door, clearly preventing them from bursting in. When Detective Mercer returned, he was accompanied by another officer, a woman with kind eyes who introduced herself as Sergeant Rebecca Hayes. She sat across from me, offering a gentle smile. "We're going to need you to give a formal statement," she said. "Everything you remember from the phone call, the timeline, what your parents said to you. Can you do that?" My throat felt tight, but my resolve was hardening into something stronger than diamond. They had made their decision about who I was. Now I was making mine. The formal statement took another 2 hours and 15 minutes. They made me repeat things several times, looking for inconsistencies. I knew what they were doing, and it only confirmed to me that I was telling the truth, that this wasn't some malicious fiction born of sibling rivalry. "Has there been any recent tension between you and your sister?" Sergeant Hayes asked. I admitted there had always been tension, but not necessarily fighting. It was more like she existed in the light and I lived in her shadow. That's just how our family operated. "Could you elaborate?" I took a deep breath, trying to articulate dynamics that had always just been. Scarlett was the pretty one, the smart one, the one with potential. I was just there. My parents made it clear in 1,000 tiny ways. Better clothes for her, fancier birthday parties, more focus on her problems. I learned to become invisible. That must have been painful. "It felt normal," I explained, a bitter laugh escaping me. At least I thought it was. Maybe every family has a scapegoat and a favored child. I just happened to be born into the wrong role. Sergeant Hayes and Detective Mercer exchanged an unreadable glance. She made a few more notes. "Is this the first time they've asked you to make a sacrifice for your sister?" The question hit differently. Memories, despite their age, came flooding back, vivid and stinging. I was 16 when I got my first job, I explained slowly. Bagging groceries at the downtown store. I saved every penny for over a year to go on the school trip to Washington, D.C. It cost $950. Did you go? No. 10 days before the trip, Scarlett's car broke down. She was 18, just got her license. Dad, said the family, couldn't afford both the repair and my trip. He used my savings to fix her car. The old hurt felt distant now, like it had happened to someone else. Scarlett went to prom in that car. I looked at the school trip photos on Facebook. Did your parents ever pay you back? They said I was selfish for asking. Said family required sacrifice. I told them about our college fund, which had existed until Scarlett decided she wanted to go to an expensive private university. My portion was absorbed into hers. I'd been told community college was perfectly suitable for someone with my grades. I told them about winning a regional painting competition in high school, the one thing I'd ever been truly good at. My parents had missed the award ceremony because it clashed with Scarlett's volleyball match. Mom hadn't even looked up from cooking dinner when I came home with my award and the $75 prize. That's lovely, sweetheart, she'd said absently. Can you set the table? We're eating early, Scarlett has practice. The ribbon had disappeared into a drawer. Scarlett's volleyball trophies adorn the mantel. Why didn't you leave? Sergeant Hayes asked. Once you were 19, you could have walked away. Where would I go? Even to me, the question sounded naive. I had no money, no car, no support system. And a part of me kept believing that if I just pushed harder, performed better, proved myself in some way, they'd eventually see me. And tonight, I met her gaze directly. Tonight, I finally understand. They will never see me. Not in the way I needed them to. They saw me as expendable. So I'm getting rid of them instead. Underscore, by the way, if you're still with me after all that, please hit that subscribe button. Trust me, I have more stories that will make your jaw drop, and I don't want you to miss out. Underscore, after I finished my statement, they told me to wait while they questioned my sister. I sat in a different room, nursing terrible vending machine coffee, watching the minutes tick by on the wall clock. It was past 3:18 in the morning. A victim advocate, whose name I don't even remember, came to check on me. She was young, maybe only a few years older than me, with weary eyes that said she'd seen too much. Do you have somewhere safe to stay tonight? She asked. The question hadn't even occurred to me. I have an apartment. Will your parents know how to find you? Of course they would. They'd arrive, full of fury and blame. The thought made me sick. I can connect you with resources, the advocate said, handing me a card. Counseling services, temporary housing. What you're going through is a kind of familial trauma. I took her card, but knew I wouldn't call. I'd handled this the way I handled everything else. Alone, silently, and without asking for aid that might not come. Detective Mercer found me around 4:45 a.m. He looked tired but satisfied. Your sister confessed. The evidence was overwhelming. Traffic camera footage, paint transfer on her car, and her own blood alcohol test taken tonight. Her story kept shifting, but she eventually admitted everything. Relief surged through me, so powerfully I felt dizzy. What happens now? She'll be formally charged. Given the severity of the offenses, DUI, hit and run, leaving the scene of an injury accident, she's facing significant prison time. Your testimony will be crucial during the trial. I'll be there, I promised. Whatever you need. He looked at me for a moment. Your parents are still in the building. If you want to avoid them, we can take you out through the rear entrance. I considered this, then shook my head. I'll walk out the front. I'm not hiding anymore. They were waiting in the lobby. Dad stood with his arms folded, his face like a thundercloud. Mom sat slumped on a plastic chair, looking hollowed out, as if she'd aged a decade in one night. Scarlett was nowhere to be seen. She was likely already processed, being held for arraignment. Dad's gaze fixed on me with a ferocity that would have terrified a younger me. "You've destroyed this family." "You destroyed it yourself," I replied, my voice cool and steady. "When you decided one daughter was worth more than the other, I just refused to go along with it." Mom finally looked up, her voice a whisper. "She's your sister. How could you do this to her?" "She's a drunk driver who left someone to die on the street. How could you defend her? What kind of parents were you? After everything we've done for you," Mom's voice trembled. "Like what?" The question came out harsher than I intended, fueled by years of buried resentment. "You fed me and gave me a room. That's the bare minimum of parental obligation, not a debt I owe you." Dad moved closer, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "If you walk out that door, you're dead to us. No longer family, no support. You will have nothing." I smiled. I could see it unnerved him. It wasn't a happy smile, but one of deep, liberating truth. "I already have nothing from you," I responded, meeting his stare head-on. "At least now I'm free." I walked past them, out into the early morning darkness. The sky was just beginning to brighten around the edges, that deep, bruised blue that precedes dawn. My car was alone in the parking lot. I drove home on vacant streets, feeling lighter than I had in years. The next few weeks were a blur of court dates, paperwork, and increasingly furious messages from my parents. They hired a lawyer who tried to undermine my testimony, painting me as a jealous, vengeful sister who had fabricated evidence out of spite. The traffic camera footage made that impossible, but they still tried. Then Mrs. Evelyn Parker's family contacted the prosecutor's office, asking if they could meet with me. I agreed, nervous to face the woman whose life my sister had almost ended. Mrs. Evelyn Parker was in a wheelchair when I met her. Her daughter, Natalie Parker, gently wheeled her into the Victim Services office where we'd agreed to meet. She was smaller than I expected, with wispy gray hair and trembling hands, but her eyes were sharp, compassionate. "You're Claire Bennett," she remarked, her gaze searching my face. "You look like you haven't slept in weeks." "Neither do you," I blurted, then instantly regretted my bluntness. But she laughed, a sound like rustling leaves. "I like honesty. Sit down, dear. Let's talk." We spent 2 hours together. She described the accident from her perspective. Crossing the street after her book club meeting, the sudden impact, waking up in the hospital unable to move her legs, months of physical therapy, financial ruin, and nightmares that still woke her at 3 a.m. "I'm so sorry," I said, as if I could somehow apologize for my sister's actions. "You didn't do this," Mrs. Evelyn Parker stated firmly. "And according to the police, you're the only one in your family who tried to make it right. Your parents actually approached my daughter. Did you know that?" My blood ran cold. "What?" Natalie Parker pulled out her phone and played a saved voicemail. My father's unmistakable voice echoed in the small room. "Hello, Mrs. Evelyn Parker. This is Robert Ashford. I'm calling to negotiate a settlement. My daughter made a terrible mistake, but she's young and has a long future ahead of her. I'm willing to pay a substantial sum if you're willing to speak with the prosecution about lowering the charges." He tried to buy her silence. I shouldn't have been surprised, but I still was. "I told him to go to hell," Natalie Parker said simply. "Your sister nearly killed my mother and drove away. No amount of money changes that." Mrs. Evelyn Parker reached over and clasped my hand with shaky fingers. "But you spoke the truth. In a family that clearly prioritizes image over integrity, you chose the right thing. That takes a level of guts most people never have to find." Her words stuck with me through the trial, through my sister's 5-year sentence, and through my parents' final cruel texts telling me I was no longer their daughter. Scarlett was convicted and sentenced to 5 years. Mom and Dad had hired the best lawyers money could buy, but the evidence was overwhelming. Traffic cameras, paint samples, and testimony from a jogger who witnessed the entire incident. My sister's blood alcohol level had been nearly double the legal limit. The day after the sentencing, I packed up my studio apartment. My phone was constantly ringing with calls from my parents, which I sent straight to voicemail. The messages became increasingly nasty as they realized I wasn't going to respond. The first one from Mom was almost conciliatory. "Claire Bennett, we need to talk. You've made your point." By the sixth, her true feelings surfaced. "You ruined your sister's life out of spite. I knew you were jealous of her, but I never imagined you'd be this cruel." Dad's messages were all about realism. "Scarlett's actions were wrong, but your stubbornness has cost this family hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees. Your sister's future is wrecked. I hope you can live with it." I could. I slept better than I had in years. I relocated to Portland, 3 states away from my family in Ohio. I enrolled in community college using the money I'd saved from working extra shifts at the grocery store. The plan had always been there, hidden behind years of their low expectations and my own resigned acquiescence. Now nothing could stop me. My academic advisor, Dr. Allison Walsh, was the first person to truly see my potential. She pored over my placement tests with genuine interest. "Have you ever considered majoring in computer science? These analytical results are extraordinary." "I barely finished high school," I admitted, explaining that my family always felt I wasn't college material. Dr. Walsh took off her glasses and studied me with keen brown eyes. "Your family was mistaken. I've been doing this for 28 years. You have aptitude." Those words changed everything. I plunged myself into my studies with a feverish intensity. Programming languages made more sense to me than anything else. There were rules, logic, problems with clear answers. Work yielded results. Effort mattered. The first semester was brutal. I'd been out of school for 11 years, and my study habits were almost non-existent. Everything my peers seemed to instinctively know: how to take notes, prepare for exams, juggle multiple deadlines. I had to learn by trial and error. I failed my first programming midterm. Afterward, I sat in my car and cried for 25 minutes, convinced my parents had been right all along. Then, I wiped my eyes, went to Dr. Walsh's office hours, and asked for help. She didn't sugarcoat it. "You've fallen behind. Your fundamentals are weak, but you're also one of the most driven students I've met. Determination can accomplish a lot." She connected me with a tutor, a doctoral student named Kevin O'Connor, who was endlessly patient with my stupid questions. We met 4 times a week in the library, working through problems until the concepts clicked. Slowly, steadily, I began to get it. I earned an AIB on my 3rd midterm. I got an A on my final exam. Kevin O'Connor high-fived me after the grades came out. "Do you know what the difference was?" he said with shining eyes. "You stopped being afraid of making mistakes. You just kept trying until you got it right." His observation cut deeper than he knew. I'd spent my entire life terrified of being wrong, because being wrong meant proving my parents right about me. But in this new world I was building, being wrong just meant I hadn't learned something yet. There was no shame in it, only opportunity. The next semester, I took 6 classes and worked 28 hours a week at a small computer firm to pay my bills. Sleep became an unaffordable luxury. I lived on instant ramen and coffee, studying in every spare moment between work and school. Marcus Grant, the owner, noticed my dedication. He'd started the company in his garage 6 years ago, growing it with sheer stubborn persistence, a path I recognized in myself. "You're going to burn out if you keep this pace," he warned me one evening when he found me debugging code at 1:10 a.m. "I can't afford to slow down," I explained simply. "I'm making up for lost time." "Lost time from what?" I gave him a truncated version of my story. The family that had abandoned me, my sister in prison, and the decision that had cost me everything while also giving me everything. Marcus listened without interrupting, his gaze becoming thoughtful. When I finished, he sat back in his chair and nodded once. My parents wanted me to be a doctor, he explained. Traditional, prestigious, honorable. I dropped out of medical school to write code in my garage. They didn't speak to me for 3 years. Did they eventually come around? Eventually, but by then, I realized I no longer needed their approval. He gestured around the office of the company he'd built. This is mine. They can accept it or reject it. Either way, it exists. That exchange fundamentally changed how I viewed my own journey. I'd been running from my family's judgment, trying to prove them wrong. Marcus showed me an alternative, building something so undeniably mine that their opinions became irrelevant. Within a year, I transferred to Portland State University on a full scholarship. I continued working part-time at Marcus's software company, analyzing code, soaking up everything I could. You're wasting your time doing grunt work, he told me after I solved a problem that had stumped their senior developers for weeks. I'm moving you to the development team. The development team consisted of 7 people, all with computer science degrees from prestigious universities. I was the only community college transfer, the only one who started coding after turning 26. The only woman. Brandon Cole, my new boss, made his doubts clear early on. Marcus likes to give people chances, he told me after my first team meeting. But this is professional grade work. If you can't keep up, speak up before you drag down the whole team. I kept my mouth shut and my head down, letting my work speak for itself. When Brandon Cole assigned me what he clearly thought was the tedious task of documenting historical code that no one wanted to touch, I discovered 3 critical security vulnerabilities hidden in the ancient routines. Marcus called an emergency meeting after I submitted my report. If the weaknesses had been exploited by the wrong people, the company could have faced catastrophic consequences. Not only did I find them, but I also presented elegant solutions that would patch the holes without disrupting existing functionality. Brandon Cole's expression as Marcus praised my work in front of the entire company was almost worth the sleepless hours I had spent poring over the code. Good catch, Brandon Cole mumbled, unable to meet my gaze. Just doing my job, I said evenly. But something had shifted. The other developers started approaching me with questions, seeking my input on design decisions, including me in informal conversations around the coffee machine. I was becoming part of the team, earning respect one challenge at a time. My social life, such as it was, mainly consisted of study groups and coworkers. I'd learned to be alone within my family, and that skill translated well into my newfound freedom. But there was a difference between voluntary solitude and forced isolation. Maya Collins from my database management class invited me to a party at her place. I almost declined. Parties were never my thing, but something made me say yes. The gathering was small, about 14 people, mostly computer science students. They talked code and theory, debating politely about the best programming languages. For the first time in my life, I was in a room where I understood the conversation and could genuinely contribute. You're the one who found those security flaws at Chen's firm, right? Asked a guy named Jordan Pierce. I heard about it through the internship network. Pretty amazing. People were talking about my work, impressed by something I had done. The novelty of it almost made me giddy. I started accepting more invitations. Coffee with Maya Collins, lunch with Kevin O'Connor, happy hour with the development team. Building a social network from scratch was hard and uncomfortable, but it was mine based on who I truly was, not who I was expected to be. My neighbor, Helen Gallagher, became an unexpected friend. She reminded me of what a mother could be, engaged, supportive, critical when needed, and always kind. She taught me how to cook real food, not just ramen and pre-made meals. You're too thin, she declared, arriving at my apartment one Saturday with bags of groceries. Come on, I'm teaching you how to make lasagna. Her kitchen was warm and messy, full of a life well lived. Photos of children and grandchildren adorned the fridge. Plants grew on every windowsill. She moved through the space with ease, selecting pans and ingredients, explaining each step. Cooking is chemistry, she explained. You understand coding. You can understand this. She was right. Following a recipe was like following an algorithm. Precise quantities, defined steps, predictable results. I approached learning with the same zeal I did everything else. While we waited for the lasagna to bake, Helen Gallagher mentioned that her granddaughter had gone to college for computer science. She's doing very well. Works at a big company in Silicon Valley. Are you close to her? Helen Gallagher's face flashed with sadness. Not as close as I'd like. She's busy. I'm old. That's life. You're not old, I gently reminded her. You're teaching me to make lasagna. She chuckled and squeezed my hand. Claire Bennett, you're wonderful for my ego. I'm glad you moved next door. The statement struck a raw nerve. Someone was glad I existed in their space. It was such a simple thing, yet I'd never experienced it before. The lasagna came out perfectly. Helen Gallagher sent me home with half of it and a promise to make bread from scratch the next week. My parents called a couple of times that first year. I changed my phone number, but they kept finding my new contact info. I never responded, letting their increasingly furious voicemails pile up before deleting them in batches. Then, around 16 months after I moved to Portland, Mom caught me in a moment of weakness. I had just finished a brutal exam and wasn't paying attention when I answered an unfamiliar number. Her voice on the other end was strained with rage. Scarlett writes to us about how awful jail is. She cries every day. She's having panic attacks. The other inmates are abusive to her, and you just go on living your life as if nothing happened. She hit someone with her car and left them to die on the street. I replied gently, my voice cold and professional. Mrs. Evelyn Parker spent 3 months in the hospital. She still can't walk without assistance. Please tell me more about Scarlett's jail experience. You could have prevented all of this. Mom's voice cracked. One small sacrifice. That's all we asked. You wanted me to go to prison for a crime I didn't commit. You said I was trashy, ugly, and useless compared to her. You wanted me to throw away my life because you believed hers was more valuable. My voice stayed firm and steady. So I made a decision to. I chose myself. You are not the girl I raised. Good. Your daughter was miserable. I hung up and blocked the number. That was 3 years ago, and I haven't communicated with them since. 2 months ago, I received a message on LinkedIn from James Callahan. The name sounded familiar, but I couldn't place it. Then I remembered Scarlett's fiancé, James, with whom she had supposedly planned a future. His message was brief. I hope this reaches you. I know we've never met. I wanted you to know that I ended my engagement to your sister about 7 months after her conviction. Your parents told her you'd been lying about what happened that night and had sabotaged her out of envy. I want you to know I never believed them. I contacted Mrs. Evelyn Parker's family and learned the facts. I'm sorry for everything you went through. You did the right thing. I stared at the message for a long time. The vindication felt distant, like it belonged to someone else. I'd stopped needing their approval years ago, but I replied anyway. Thank you for reaching out. I hope you're well. His reply arrived an hour later. I married someone else 2 years ago. She's a public defender. Works with people the system fails. Meeting her helped me understand why you made that decision. Some things are more important than familial loyalty. I grinned at that. A stranger's husband understood me more than my own parents ever did. The years in Portland changed me in ways I'm still discovering. After struggling through community college, I transferred to Portland State and graduated summa cum laude with a degree in computer science. The girl who had barely finished high school graduated university with a 3.8 GPA and job offers from 3 separate companies. I decided to stay with Marcus Grant. Loyalty was important to me, and he'd given me a chance when I was nobody. 2 years after graduation, I was promoted to lead developer at Marcus's firm, which had grown from a scrappy startup to a real contender in the cybersecurity industry. My income had already reached 6 figures. I bought a small house in a quiet neighborhood with a garden I was learning to tend. Tomatoes, it turns out, were supposedly harder to grow than code. My neighbor, Helen Gallagher, the retired teacher, brought me cuttings for a flower garden and taught me about composting. She knew nothing about my family, Scarlett, jail, or the decision I had made. To her, I was just Claire Bennett, the quiet young woman next door who occasionally needed help identifying weeds. "You have good instincts," she told me one Saturday morning as we worked in my garden. "The soil was completely depleted when you bought the place. Look at it now." I examined the dark, rich earth streaming between my fingertips. Something that had died was brought back to life through careful work. The metaphor was not lost on me. Scarlett was freed on parole last week. She'd served 4 years of her 5-year sentence with credit for good behavior. I knew because she had somehow found my email address and sent me a message. The subject line read, "We need to talk." The email itself was long and meandering, alternating between fury and self-pity. She'd lost her graduate school acceptance. James had left her. She had a criminal record, making employment almost impossible. Our parents had spent their retirement savings on legal fees and appeals, and somehow it was all my fault. "You ruined my life because you were jealous," she wrote. "You always resented that I was prettier, smarter, and more accomplished. You saw one opportunity to tear me down, and you took it. I made a mistake. People make mistakes, but you had a choice. You chose to be cruel." I read it 3 times, waiting for an emotion to surface. Anger, guilt, satisfaction, anything. But there was only a faint echo of who she had always been, and who I had finally ceased being. I carefully composed my response. "Scarlett, you were driving intoxicated. You struck a 66-year-old woman in a crosswalk and drove away as she lay bleeding on the pavement. Mrs. Evelyn Parker survived, but she will never fully recover. She had to relearn how to walk. She is still in chronic pain, and her medical bills have bankrupted her family savings. Our parents asked me to go to prison for your crime, telling me I was worthless, ugly, and that my life was less important than yours. They asked me to give up my freedom so you could keep your opportunities, but I refused. That is the extent of my crime against you. You believe you deserve special treatment because your parents spent your entire life telling you that you were exceptional, but you're not. You're just someone who made a bad decision and had to pay for it. I sincerely hope you rebuild your life, but you'll have to do it the same way I did. Mine, through hard work, accountability, and the understanding that no one owes you anything just because you want it. I will not be responding to any future emails. I wish you the best, but I am no longer a part of your life." I emailed it, then promptly blocked her email address. Then I blocked my parents' emails, severing the final thread that connected us. The relief was profound. 3 days ago, I received a letter in certified mail. There was no return address, but the postmark said Ohio. Inside was a handwritten note from my father. "Claire Bennett, your mother is very ill. The doctors don't think she has much time left. She is asking for you. Whatever your grievances with this family, she is still your mother. She raised you, nourished you, gave you a home. You owe her at least one visit. Put aside your pride and do the right thing. Dad." I held the letter for a long time, sitting on my porch swing as the dusk light faded over my garden. Helen Gallagher was watering her flowers next door, humming something tuneless but happy. The dying woman was not my mother in any way that truly counted. She stopped being that the moment she looked at me coldly and decided I was disposable. Our biological tie was just a genetic fluke, no more meaningful than having a blood type in common with a stranger. I thought of the mother I wished I had, the one who would have protected both her children, who would have had Scarlett face her consequences while still offering love and support, who saw value in both of us. That mother hadn't existed. I had finally accepted the reality. I walked inside and wrote a quick reply. Dad, I hope Mom gets the care she needs. I will not be visiting. Claire Bennett. I mailed it the next morning. For weeks later, another certified letter arrived. I knew exactly what it would say before I opened it. The funeral notification was simple and conventional. My mother had passed away. Services would be held in the church, where I was christened as an infant, a place I hadn't visited in nearly a decade. I was listed as a survivor, as if I had been present in her life. I placed the notification into the recycling bin and went to work. Yesterday, Marcus Grant called me into his office. I'd been working on a massive cybersecurity contract that had the potential to propel the company to new heights. My work was precise, identifying problems before they arose, fixing them with elegant efficiency. Marcus Grant smiled as he spoke. The client was impressed. They want you to lead the implementation team. It's a promotion, a significant raise in your own department. We talked specifics for an hour. This role would make me one of the youngest department heads in the company. The salary was absurd, something I'd never imagined applying to my life. I accepted on the spot. Walking back to my car, I called Dr. Allison Walsh. She'd become a friend over the years, and I checked in with her quarterly to report my progress and ask for advice. I told her about the promotion. Her delighted chuckle filled the phone. I knew you would. You've earned it 1,000 times over. She paused. I keep thinking about our first meeting in your office when you told me I had aptitude. You did. You do, she continued, her voice growing softer. I've seen many students come through my programs. Very few have your intellect and determination. But I've also observed something. The people who accomplish the most are often the ones who have something to prove. You had more to prove than most. I don't anymore, I realized, speaking it aloud for the first time. I'm not trying to prove them wrong anymore. I'm just living. That's when you've truly won, Dr. Allison Walsh replied softly. We talked a little longer before saying goodbye. I drove home through Portland's nighttime traffic, watching the city lights come alive against the darkening sky. My phone was buzzing with texts from coworkers congratulating me. Plans for a celebratory dinner were already underway. I thought of Scarlett in Ohio, newly released, probably struggling to find work because of her record, living with our father in the house where we grew up. Mom had passed 4 weeks ago, buried without my tears. I imagined Dad, alone with the daughter he tried to save and the one he'd discarded. And all I felt was a distant hope that they'd eventually come to terms with their decisions, just as I had. My house glowed warmly as I pulled into the driveway. Helen Gallagher waved from her porch, saying something about bringing zucchini bread tomorrow. Inside, my home office was filled with evidence of my real life. Framed degrees, work awards, photos of coworkers who had become friends. No family photos. I stopped displaying them years ago. I cooked dinner and worked in my garden until the light faded completely. The tomatoes were finally flourishing, laden with fruit that would ripen in the coming weeks. I'd learned patience with them, understanding that progress couldn't be forced, but rather nurtured and given time. My phone vibrated one last time. An email from an unknown address. I almost deleted it before reading, but something compelled me to open it. Miss Claire Bennett, my name is Natalie Parker. My mother was the victim of the hit and run involving your sister. I wanted to reach out because my mother asked me to contact you. She read about your sister's release in the news and wanted to tell you something. She wants you to know that she has forgiven your sister for what happened. But more than that, she wanted me to tell you that your story, your honesty about what occurred that night, restored her faith in humanity. She had been struggling with anger and resentment, feeling like justice didn't exist. Learning that someone had chosen truth over familial loyalty, even at great personal sacrifice, helped her heal in ways medicine couldn't. My mother is 74 now. She's still in pain and uses a cane, but she's at peace. She wanted you to know that your choice mattered to her, and it helped. Thank you for your integrity. Sincerely, Natalie Parker. I read it 3 times. Tears blurred the words, surprising me with their intensity. I hadn't cried about anything in years, but these weren't tears of sadness or rage. They were something cleaner, almost like a finality. I wrote back, "Dear Natalie, please tell your mother that her note meant more than she knows. I hope she continues to heal. I hope she has many happy years ahead. Thank you for reaching out. With thanks, Claire Bennett." I sent it and closed my laptop. The house was quiet around me, full of the life I had built from nothing. No family legacy, no parental support, no sister's shadow to live in. Just my own work, my own decisions, and my steadfast refusal to accept their definition of who I was meant to be. I moved through my house, turning off lights and closing doors, preparing for sleep. In my bedroom, I caught my reflection in the mirror. The face staring back wasn't ugly. It had never been ugly. It was entirely mine, lived in and earned, marked by challenges my family would never comprehend because they hadn't bothered to see them. Tomorrow, I'd go to work and begin building my new department. I'd hire people who showed promise, just like Marcus Grant and Dr. Allison Walsh had seen in me. I'd create something worthwhile with nothing but effort and vision. My phone was silent now. No more letters from Ohio. No more guilt trips or manipulations. My mother was dead and buried without my tears. My father had reclaimed Scarlett, the daughter he had chosen. They could rebuild whatever connection they wanted without my interference. Helen Gallagher's zucchini bread might appear at some point. Work would be challenging and fulfilling. My garden would need tending. My life would continue, built on my own foundations and nourished by the effort I chose to make. They wanted me to give up everything for Scarlett because they believed I was worth less. Instead, I walked away and realized how much I was truly worth when measured by my own standards, not theirs. The math worked out better than they could have ever dreamed. I got into bed and slept peacefully, dreamlessly, like someone who had finally let go of a burden she was never meant to bear. Tomorrow would bring new problems, new wins, and new proof that the person they discarded was precisely the person who ought to be cherished. And that, I thought as I drifted off to sleep, was the sweetest justice of all. I hope my story resonated with some of you. It's been a long road, and it's still ongoing. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever had to choose yourself over your family's expectations, or leave a relationship that was holding you back? Tell me what you think in the comments section below. I genuinely want to know.